Rally around the colors, one and all. It's time to snuff a little gunpowder, as Joseph Plum Martin might have written. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Sitrep podcast. I'm your host, Oriskany Jim, and as you may have guessed from our intro, it's time to take another look at the American Revolution on the wargaming table in 20mm. Now, the battle that we're going to be looking at in particular today is the Battle of Hubbardton, fought in what would become Vermont on 7 July 1777. This is part of a British campaign under the leadership of General Johnny Burgoyne, coming down out of Canada into upstate New York. His overall objective was to divide the American colonies in half by way of Lake Champlain and the Hudson River. So as Burgoyne is coming out of Canada down into upstate New York, and now he enters into Lake Champlain, the first big obstacle he's going to run across is Fort Ticonderoga. This was known as the Gibraltar of the North back in those days. It was actually an old French fortification, I believe, back from the French and Indian War and even back before that. So the Americans have now held this fort since May of 1775. Thank you, Benedict Arnold. The commander there, General Arthur Sinclair, is confronted with a vastly superior force. He's really only got about 2 regiments there to hold the fort, but he thinks he's okay because he's in, this gigantic fortification. Now, I should note this is one of those Spanish sort of star fort, roughly speaking, designed fortifications, very low, thick walls, meant to defeat incoming artillery rounds along a relatively flat trajectory. The problem for Sinclair is that across the lake, and this is a very, very narrow lake, there is a very tall mountain called Mount Defiance. He's okay because it's impossible for any army to get artillery up here. It's way too steep and it's way too thickly wooded. Until the British get there. Specifically, the Chief of Engineers that works for Brigadier General Simon Fraser, he commands Burgoyne's advance corps. He does get some artillery up there against all odds, and now Arthur Sinclair is kind of screwed. He's got artillery on higher elevation that can shoot across the lake straight over his walls and basically pulverize that fort more or less at will. So now Sinclair has a tough decision. He can either stay there and basically get pounded into oblivion, or he can withdraw these troops and save them to fight another day. Specifically, this is among some other units, but primarily the 11th Massachusetts under Colonel Ebenezer Francis, and the 2nd New Hampshire under Nathan Hale. No, not that Nathan Hale, before you ask. But nevertheless, these 2 regiments, along with some militia that is under Colonel Seth Warner, the Green Mountain Boys, they pull out of Fort Ticonderoga, and their new objective is to withdraw eastward into, again, what was going to become Vermont. He had to withdraw eastward because Mount Defiance is on the west side of the lake. He can't withdraw into the enemy. This is actually on America's very first Independence Day, July 4th, 1777. Not the most auspicious way to celebrate your nation's first birthday. But as these units are withdrawing, Burgoyne is not exactly going to let them get away with it. He sends Simon Fraser and his advance corps hell for leather after these guys to catch them, pin them down in open country, and tear them apart before they can rejoin the main Continental Army of the North. This leads to the Battle of Hubbardton, which, for lack of a better term, is basically a big delaying action. It's, again, Simon Fraser's advance corps of Burgoyne's Northern Army up against elements of 11th Massachusetts, 2nd New Hampshire, and again, elements of these local militia, specifically the Green Mountain Boys under Colonel Seth Warner. Now, the Green Mountain Boys in the American Revolution do have something of a mixed reputation. When they operated under other leaders like Ethan Allen in earlier years, they were not the most disciplined of militias. They weren't a terribly effective fighting force, probably the nicest way I can put that. However, once they get under other guys like Colonel Seth Warner, that we're going to see here on today's table, he kind of whips them into shape and makes them into a force definitely worth reckoning with. So like I said, we have Simon Fraser's advance corps of Burgoyne's army advancing eastward off of Lake Champlain, which they've now taken, and they're now trying to chase down these American units. Let's go to the 20mm table and see how this shakes out. Alrighty, here is our table for today. We have the Crown approaching generally out of the northwest, and we have the Patriots kind of doing the best they can with a defense or delaying action in the east and southeast. So here for the Patriots, we have the 11th Massachusetts and 2nd New Hampshire forming the main belt of the Patriot, air quotes, defense, generally astride that road that leads into Fort Ticonderoga. We have some Continental Riflemen on the table, because why not? They're always fun to have on the table. Got to make the British officers nervous. And a large body of Colonel Seth Warner's Green Mountain Boy militia. which again is very variable depending on when in the war you're talking about as far as their true quality level. Here at Ticonderoga, they're actually pretty good. We have all kinds of Crown forces coming down from the table. Like Simon Fraser's Advanced Corps was a very mixed force. We have British Light Infantry, British Grenadiers, British Aligned Regiment in the form of 24th of Foot, Hessian Grenadiers, Hessian Jaegers.
Thousands of godless Hessian mercenaries among them!
Sure. Kind of a blend between light infantry and American riflemen, although again, they're not really either of those, but it's kind of a blend between the two. And a contingent of Native American scouts from the Iroquois nations that were allied with the Crown during the American Revolution. I should state, before we get too deep into this, that the system we're using is, now don't laugh at me, TSR's battle system. That is 2nd edition battle system specifically, originally written for mass combat in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I know that sounds crazy, but we've talked about how this system actually works really well for these early Black Powder era kind of games in previous videos on our channel. Check them out if you're interested. Now we do kit bash kind of the hell out of this system in this particular game. We're trying to remove some of the large amount of saving rolls and basically the excessive dice rolling in the game. Kind of slows down the turn sequence. This edition or this homebrew kit bash version of the rules. This is its first time out on the table, so bear with us as we try it out. So again, we got some Iroquois scouts there. You saw some Hessians before. You do see a large amount of light infantry and grenadiers for the British here. Now, normally, as we all know, a regiment in this time period had 10 companies. 8 companies were line companies, 1 was grenadiers, 1 was light infantry. What Fraser did was he took all of his regiments and he stripped all the grenadiers out of all of those regiments. He stripped all the light infantry out of those regiments, and he formed them into their own little light infantry and a grenadier, almost like divisions or corps, like these ad hoc battle groups almost. And he used them for specialized missions, like we see here at Hubbardton. So the British are coming down the road. They have to get through the American position here. The Americans are probably going to lose the battle. It's really up to whether or not they can delay the British long enough to make a difference in the overall campaign. So as the Crown forces continue to move down the Ticonderoga road, note I'm always going to say the Crown, because in the American Revolution, especially this upstate campaign of 1777, the air quotes British force included all kinds of different contingents. Native Americans, like we just saw a second ago, Crown Germans from various provinces, they sort of get lumped together into the term Hessians, although that's not really correct. Canadians, you name it. There's all American loyalists, to be frank. There's all kinds of nations fighting for the Crown, so we just say it's the Crown. Meanwhile, I'm moving forward some of my patriot forces there as best I can to take some of this key defense terrain that's going to, I hope, play a decisive factor when we finally get to grips with each other. So the high ground with the 11th Massachusetts over there on my left, forward with the trees for my riflemen and my 2nd New Hampshire, and I'm trying to move forward to that fence with my Seth Warner's Green Mountain Point militia. Now notice that some of these units are in what's called skirmisher formation. That's a quick rule in battle system. I mean, lots of different games have a similar system where the units have to be at least about half an inch between bases, and it's basically like an open order kind of formation. There's all kinds of advantages and disadvantages to that. What's really cool is that in battle system, for a little bit of extra point cost per figure, some units can switch back and forth between regular formation and skirmish formation. This is especially important for units like, say, American Continental Riflemen, Hessian Jaegers, and especially British Light Infantry. They can take the skirmish formation and get the benefits thereof during certain parts of the battle, and then when it comes time to actually close and close ranks and do some business, they're able to do that. Some units, like Native Americans, are not able to do that. But we're pretty much close enough to where at least some of us can start shooting at each other. So let's see how let's see how it goes. All right. So now my American riflemen, which have an extended range of 24 inches, have taken their first pot shots at British light infantry and inflicted some casualties. In fact, with a lucky roll on the morale dice, I actually managed to rattle their morale a little bit. You see that shaken counter on them. So now that light infantry has had to fall back. Notice that they're still in open order. They're not really base to base. So, yeah, that's why they're not like in a line or a double ranked line or anything like that. They're still in open order, sort of a skirmish formation. I have Native American skirmishers on both my flanks. Luckily, I do have 11th Massachusetts on the high ground. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. In all seriousness, there are rules for that. So, like an advantage for shooting off of high ground. So hopefully I'll be able to hold that wing there pretty well when it gets to it. So unfortunately, yeah, here come the other Native Americans. They literally just tried to charge my American riflemen. Now, my American riflemen will get what's called pass-through fire, or sort of like an opportunity fire. So I will get a chance to shoot at them as they come up. We're going to wait until they get to point-blank range. I'm going to fire at them when they're right about 2 inches. And the reason for that is when you're meeting a charge, you have to make a morale check at 1 inch. So I want to fire and hopefully break that charge before I have to make a morale save myself. Because let's face it, in the American Revolution, one of the huge disadvantages for patriot units, they have very bad morale. Most of them were very badly trained, especially in the early part of the war. This is way before the von Steuben comes in and starts to straighten out the American Continental regiments as far as how they're trained. Yeah, it's even the Continental regiments up here in New York weren't always the best, never mind the militia. So also, yeah, here comes some Hessians. So basically all of our light infantry is starting to close the gap and open fire. There's been some more fire now among our forward elements, so let's go through each little bit of fire here, resolve it, and then sort of review what happened. So the first thing that happened was, again, those Native Americans tried to come at my Continental riflemen here. Didn't really work out. I did try to get my 11th Massachusetts in on the pass-through fire. As you can see, though, they're kind of out of arc. There's a 45-degree limitation for that in battle system. Meanwhile, 2nd New Hampshire and the Green Mountain Boys was also putting some fire into those Hessian Jaegers, and we'll talk about that in a second. So again, I was able to break up this charge, cause enough damage to force a couple morale checks, which Mark was good enough to fail. Once they become shaken, they have to stop advancing, move back 4 inches. That's the end of the charge. Now, I do have some more Native Americans confronting me. You can barely see them in those woods there at the top of your screen. They're sort of confronted by the Green Mountain Boys that are now deployed online in closed order behind that rail fence. Now, when I run American Revolution in this system, I do have sort of a 2-tier system for my militia, because the quality of American militia historically varied wildly. So I know that they weren't really Continental militia, the Green Mountain Boys. I do sort of count them as Continental militia, only because this allows them to access some of the special rules and special abilities that Continental militia gets. This allows them to do things like close ranks and come to base, sort of, a formation there behind that fence. This is going to make a big difference because now those Native Americans are not going to be able to charge them. All right, now one of the plans I'm thinking about doing here is taking the 11th Massachusetts on that high ground and flanking what's left of those Native American scouts. This will more or less sort of delay or break up a great part of the British right wing. The British center I'm going to have a really tough time dealing with because there is some artillery hiding back there that Ron is trying to bring up and bring online. It's going to take him a couple turns to do that, but let me, quick spoiler alert, I'm not looking forward to that because I don't have any artillery with which to sort of counter. By the way, I don't think there really was artillery at the Battle of Hubbardton. Nevertheless, we just wanted to try it out here at the club and give these new rules a bit of a spin. So I'm not doing too bad so far, but that might change, especially once that artillery gets deployed. Let's see how this game develops going forward. Right, this is what I was afraid of. Things are starting to go very badly for the Americans, especially in the center, now that the Crown has its 6-pounder artillery set up. And again, I don't really have any artillery with which to counter that. So, I'll be honest, I think I was just a little bit too bold with my 2nd New Hampshire. They were right here. They managed to do a tremendous amount of damage there on the Hessian Jaegers. I'm not really worried about them anymore. There's only 2 figures left. They're shaken. I don't think there's a really big threat there. However, these 2 6-pounders are now unlimbered.
England is poised to strike a fatal blow!
They have both fired and scored really good hits at medium range against my 2nd New Hampshire. For several morale checks, one of which I failed catastrophically.
These rustics are so inept.
In battle system, if you fail a morale check by 7 or more, it's considered a catastrophic failure. I walked in a bit of a crossfire there between Hessian Jaegers, Native Americans in those woods on my right, and British cannons on my to my center. Surprise, surprise, the 2nd New Hampshire is suddenly having a very bad day. I'm going to try and fix that. Alright, so I have 11th Massachusetts on the high ground. I have managed to swing them around, although I did have to change my frontage there. My idea is to put fire down into the flank of these Iroquois scouts. This was a blatant rules mistake on my part. On the table, I just straight out forgot that skirmish units don't really have flanks.
These rustics are so inept.
Because they're all kind of an open order unit, like each stand is its own representation of about 20 men. Nevertheless, I count up the number of figures I have. Again, I can only fire 2 ranks deep, so I only have 8 dice. And again, this is our new sort of kit-bashed edition of battle system. We're trying to eliminate the multiple sizes of dice, and we're trying to eliminate all these saving throws. So it turns out I have to shoot a 9, or I have to hit a 9 on a d10. Alright, so I'm at more than 5 inches, less than 10. That puts me at medium range. So I look up the modifier for that. Shooting at minimum range, I have to subtract 1 from all my rolls. So instead of trying to hit a 9 on a d10, I now basically have to hit a 10 on a d10. But I have 8 dice because I have 2 ranks of 4 figures. And as it turns out, I don't score any hits. So that's that. Here comes some more fire from some of the Green Mountain Boys under Seth Warner. They're going to go ahead and try to eliminate what's left of those Hessian Jaegers there in the creek. Alright, now I am at extreme range, so I am going to have to take 2 off of all my die rolls. The good news is I have all 12 figures available because they're only stacked 2 ranks deep. They aren't stacked 3 ranks deep like the 11th Massachusetts was. So I get to fire for all my figures. There's 12 figures there. I get to fire 12 dice. That's 240 men presenting arms and blasting away. I got a 9 and 2 10s. That eliminates 2 figures. There was only, well, actually 3 figures. There was only 2 there.
When the regulars fired, it seemed like one sheet of flame from right to left. Oh, it was beautiful.
So Mark's already taken them off the table. Thanks very much, Mark. And, alright, I feel pretty good about that. I've taken 1 crown unit completely off the table. Here is a unit I don't feel so good about, 2nd New Hampshire, which has not only been shaken, but routed. Good news is, you see there, their regimental commander, that's Nathan Hale, he will give a bonus for their rally check. But however, there's going to be some penalties on that rally check as well. Battle system assesses a penalty to rally checks not only for being shaken, but bigger checks for being routed. And if I don't make it, he's going to perform route movement again. He's on a road. Yeah, he's going to get off the table. And once a routed unit makes it off the table, he is considered destroyed for game purposes. The unit pretty much scatters to the wind, and you kind of never see him again. So yeah, not looking forward to that at all. I get basically 1 chance to make that morale check, and I'm really hoping for the best on that one. The Crown is now taking some more fire against my American left. We're having a bit of a discussion here about whether or not it's strictly legal from a turn sequence perspective for those 3 Native Americans to fire at me before I fire at them. I decided to give it to them, and I shouldn't have been that generous because out of those 3 dice, Mark rolls 2 successes, a 9 and a 10. So that's really bad news for me because, I mean, it's bad enough when I lose Continental Regulars or Militia. Guys, I apologize for my finger coming into frame like that. It's going to happen again. But what's bad news for me at the table right now is that I've lost 2 of those Continental Riflemen. And those are some of my best units. Yeah, and then I failed a morale check on top of that. Why did I let him take that shot?
So inept.
So now he's shaken. I'm going to have to back them up 4 inches. I have to move the commander out of the way there. So the reason that's so bad is not only are they the longest range units I have, they have the best attack factor, they have special skirmish formation, they can go into regular formation if they want. They're pretty expensive point-wise, and they pretty much get all the goodies as far as rules go. The really bad news is that that's my only real counter, again with the fingers, I'm really sorry about that, guys. That's my only counter against British artillery. Alright, meanwhile, the 11th Massachusetts is going to... Okay, I scored plenty of successes there. That's pretty much going to take care of the rest of those Native Americans. I get 2 successes. The only one left there is that commander figure there. So, he's going to have some choices now whether or not just to run or get captured, because he's literally the commander standing out there in the battlefield by himself. So I think he's going to run. Back to the nightmare that is the American center. You see Colonel Nathan Hale here. Hey, Nate, where's your regiment? Where's 2nd New Hampshire? Well, there's the morale roll, or technically the rally roll. I had to roll a 9 or less because of all the penalties on 2d10. I did get to add 1 to my roll because of the commander's bonus there. So really I needed a 10 or less, but as you can see, I rolled a 15. That means they immediately conduct route movement, and whee! There they go, off the table.
Nearly takes the honor out of victory. Nearly.
So what happened to 2nd New Hampshire on our table today was pretty much what happened to all too many American units, especially in the earlier part of the war: catastrophic morale failures. The British would show up and the American line would literally just crumble, especially among militia units. I know the Minutemen have this great reputation in our history. It's not justified at all. Meanwhile, I'm staring down the barrel at some Hessians.
You will not defeat Hessians. They are European soldiers.
Those 2 6-pounders are still a huge, huge threat. Good news, I have managed to rally what's left of my riflemen, so as we begin turn 4, I'm going to try to move forward, stay in cover of those trees, and maybe try to snipe some of the artillery crews. Again, that's my only counter to Royal Artillery in this game. Well, that didn't work. You can see where my Continental Riflemen were. They are now routed. Their idea was to take a shot at some of the artillery crews. Unfortunately, the Corps Light Infantry took opportunity fire or pass-through fire and broke them first. Again, Corps Light Infantry, those are light infantry companies stripped out of, at least historically in this battle, 4 or 5 different regiments here in Fraser's 1st Corps, all massed together into one sort of light infantry battle group. So now Ron is going to take a shot with his artillery into my center.
England is poised to strike a fatal blow!
He keeps trying to break up the center that I've just sort of barely repaired by extending the Green Mountain Boys. We're going to look up his numbers here. Alright, so each 6-pounder gets to roll 2 dice and add 3 to their roll, so that's cool. Meanwhile, they have to subtract 2 from their roll because they're shooting at maximum range. So that's the bad news. Now, he's shooting at a good militia, solid militia, which means his initial target is going to be a 7. That's going to drop now to a 6 because he does have, again, +3, -2 bonus. And with 4 dice, 2 for each gun, of course he hits on all 4, and that is 4 figures removed from the Green Mountain Boys. That's going to force 3 morale checks. Number 1, when a unit loses its first figure, automatic morale check. Number 2, when you come under artillery fire, artillery is just big, loud, and scary, it forces another morale check. And number 3, he's got to make a morale check because I lost 4 or more figures in a single fire step. I do get a bonus because I am near multiple multiple regimental commanders, but I do have to make 3 checks. So this is not going to be good here. All right, did make the first one, good to go. Picking up for the second one. Sweet. All right, Green Mountain Boys are holding. Oh, all right, they did fail the third one, even with the battalion commander bonus or the regimental commander bonus. That is going to force them to be shaken and fall back 4 inches. So I'm going to get the shaking counter on them for now, and I'll move them back 4 inches in just a second because I have to put down the camera and move them back over that fence. So yeah, the center is really falling apart for the Patriots. I've sort of stitched it together, didn't really work. I tried to get some Continental Riflemen up there to poke out the artillery crews. That didn't work. The good news is I am holding on the right and advancing on the left. So this battle is not over yet. Okay guys, there we have it. I'll be honest, it's not looking so hot for the Patriots so far, especially now that the British have their artillery out of limber, online, and have Patriot units under direct artillery fire. I might be able to do something about it with some long-range Patriot rifle fire. You sort of pick off the crews. This was a tactic used to great effect during the Saratoga campaign of '77. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it work on the table. Well, I'll give it the best shot I can. But we're going to have part 2 of this video out in about a week, so please watch this space to see how this turns out. For now, this is Risking Jim with the Sitrep Podcast. We are rounds complete, and as always, Tango Mike for watching.